You're listening to Loughy and Savoca, a fantasy football podcast. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, Matt Savoca. First one out of the gate. This is it. Football season right around the corner. It might seem like it's a ways away, but it's not. We're late June, talking NFL, everything fantasy football, and I'm happy to be here, man. What's going on?
What's going on, man? Thrilled to be here. Thrilled to start this adventure with you, Loughy and Savoca. And I liked how you dipped into this like sultry radio voice right as you came on the air. True professional. You know, we're having a normal conversation. Off he hits the record button. Yo, what's going on, everyone? Just a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer. But yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Happy to be here in June. I know a lot of you are signing back on for the first time in the fantasy football calendar. Maybe you saw your leagues reactivated email, and now it's time to lock back in. I'm here with my buddy, Loughy, and I'm excited to dig into the changing landscape in the NFL, and we'll do it every single week.
I think it's a nice touch. A fantasy football podcast. It's a nice ring. Loughy and Savoca, fantasy football podcast, because that's exactly what it is. But I think what makes the most sense probably coming into this one, certainly not flying blind, but we don't want to come and hit you guys with just a ton of structured nonsense that gets boring and you end up dipping out after 15 minutes. I think what makes the most sense, we're in June still. We're recording this on June 24th. There were a ton of marquee moves throughout the league this offseason. I know it happens every year, Matt, but it did feel like this season there were just more huge marquee movements than others. And also some ones that might have seemed like kind of tertiary, considering all of the big Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson, AJ Brown. But I think a lot of the smaller, lesser talked about ones could have a huge impact. And that's where I honestly love spending a lot of time from a fantasy football standpoint, because that's how you end up winning your championships.
Yeah. And honestly, the more interesting part about this particular offseason is that it was kind of a middle of the road player, and the amount of money that they got that completely changed the landscape of the NFL, you could argue, because I'm talking about Christian Kirk and the amount of money that he received from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's getting $18 million a year this year, $37 million guaranteed, and it set off fireworks throughout the top tier of the wide receiver pool, and they basically all said in unison, give us our money. And some teams made some big drastic decisions because of that. We saw Devontae Adams move on from the Packers in a trade. We saw AJ Brown move on from the Titans to the Eagles, and as you mentioned, Tyreek Hill moves from Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs to the up-and-coming Miami Dolphins, who have a new coach and have high hopes for their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, this is huge, huge from a fantasy impact, and it really is all because of Christian Kirk setting that market. Wild stuff.
4 years, $72 million. What? What?
Like, I think Marvin Jones is better than him right now. I think Marvin Jones is better at 33 years old.
It's Christian not Kirk that Kirk isn't good, and he made Christian Kirk is the type of guy that if you just spun a wheel and landed on a specific week from week to week, season to season over the last couple of years, and didn't know much about him, you'd either go, my God, this guy's incredible, or how did he just get $72 million? Because he had some monster games, right? He had several multiple touchdown games. I think he had a 3 touchdown game a couple of years ago. But aside from that, you had, first of all, let's be fair, a very spread out offense as far as pass catching.
And that's the nature of the Arizona offense.
Right. So, but are you still sold on Christian Kirk after what you've seen for $72 million? Let me tell you the one, let's just dive right into this, because we're going to talk Chiefs. I think we have to talk Chiefs. We have to talk Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins. Definitely some scenery changes on the coaching front in Minnesota and New York. We'll get into a lot of stuff. And obviously hit us up over on Twitter. If you guys have any things you want to hear about, you want to comment, you want to call us idiots, you want to thank us. Not sure why you would, but I'm always welcome to gratuity, Matt, gratuity. Follow Matt.
There you go. First $5 word of the podcast.
Well, if you remember from last year, that was the one we had a little bit of a debate about. But follow Matt at Draftaholic over on Twitter, me at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Allen Robinson. I'm so fascinated by this Allen Robinson move. I really am. I mean, you still have Cooper Kupp, who far surpassed any expectations last season. Of course, Robert Woods got hurt. I don't think it would have made a difference because Robert Woods was playing early in the year. You look at that offense. You look at, of course, Odell Beckham Jr. came in last year, but Robinson, what is it, a 3-year, $47 million deal that he just signed after not only, I'd say not a bad, but not a turbulent, but an awful year in Chicago. When you look at this contract, how much of that to you says most of his struggles, despite a few uncharacteristic drops, were actually the result of terrible quarterback play in Chicago?
Yeah. I mean, here, we still believe that Justin Fields probably, with proper coaching, will be a competent quarterback in this league. But make no bones about it. It was horribly inefficient quarterback play. And it was the same type of inefficient quarterback play that Allen Robinson has been dealing with since he entered the league. There was that one fluke year where Blake Bortles, because he had enough positive talent around him, including Allen Robinson, looked like a competent quarterback. But even then, I think Robinson had his talents squandered in
ton of garbage time. Ton of garbage time, too.
In fantasy, garbage time points count just the same, but exactly. He's never been on a competent offense. He's never been with a competent quarterback. And yes, he's competing with a super duper star in Cooper Kupp. But this is an opportunity like none other for Allen Robinson. He is in there to make a huge difference. He's making $15.5 million this year. They're going to be throwing to him plenty. I actually completely agree with his rising ADP on Underdog Fantasy. If you're doing best ball drafts right now, I want a piece of this Rams offense. And as you said, Odell Beckham had a huge role. He was scoring plenty in the fantasy category and the real life category. This is a role, that wide receiver 2, that competent wide receiver 2 role in LA that is going to be very fruitful for fantasy players.
I'm seriously looking for redemption here because Allen Robinson was one of my biggest misses last year, for sure. Like if I were to count some of the misses on one hand that were bad, Allen Robinson would be at the top of the list, along with Miles Sanders, who I'm still, one day we'll get into. I'm not out on Miles Sanders yet. I don't care if he hasn't scored. Go look at it. Go look at the efficiency numbers there. We'll talk about Jalen Hurts and how he takes away from goal line opportunities. Definitely sucks, but it was a miss last year. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, count the injuries, chalk it up to injuries or whatever you wanted, but even the lack of volume in the passing game really sucked. We can talk about that at Kansas City, but Allen Robinson was a huge miss, and I think some of it was, I don't know how much of it was his health. I think it was mostly poor quarterback play. I just remember this is a guy who had dropped. He had one of the, if not the lowest drop rate in the league at a certain threshold of targets over the past 2 seasons coming into 2021. And he started dropping some balls. He didn't look the same. I do think some of it's environment, though. Like at some point, you're just going, I got this guy
100%.
throwing me footballs, right? Like they're nowhere close. Now you're coming in with Matthew Stafford, reigning Super Bowl champions, Cooper Kupp taking up a ton of real estate or a ton of attention defensively. I'm with you. I'm okay with the rising ADP on Allen Robinson. If you're getting him, what is he going, like late 6th round right now?
He's creeping up into the 5th or even the end of the 4th, especially teams that are stacking. Remember, these are best ball ADPs right now because people want to attach themselves to superstar offenses. And we'll get into the strategies behind why you would do that, especially in a best ball tournament throughout this show. We don't have to go into the nuances now. But trying to attach yourself to elite offenses, I heard this on another podcast, and I think it's really well said. It gives you more outs because, yes, he could have an 11-target game because Cooper Kupp's getting blanketed by a team's number 1 defender. But he could also have just 4 or 5 targets, and 2 of them happen to be fantastic end zone opportunities from Matthew Stafford, ones that he's never had in the history of his career. So you just have multiple ways that wide receivers can help out your fantasy teams, both opportunity and efficiency, not to mention the fact that Allen Robinson at this point in his career is still probably really good at the position, still just 28, going to be 29 this season when it starts.
I think you'd agree, though, that ADP in redraft leagues is not going to be, and you just explained exactly why. ADP in redraft leagues, I think you're still going to be getting Allen Robinson at a spot where, of course, you're not worried about stacking, probably getting him sixth round, I think.
That's fair.
Round 6. Because, like you said, you're trying to load up on a team. If you get Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Allen Robinson, you feel fantastic in a best ball format. You don't need to do that you don't need to do that in redraft. It's not to say it's a horrible idea. It's worked with the Chiefs before. It's worked with teams before, but the Chiefs are one of those squads this year where we went from knowing exactly who we wanted. And I think it makes them so much more of a fascinating football team than they were before, because there was no way you were unless you were playing with bozos in best ball or even redraft, because in redraft I would stack all three of those guys if I could: Tyreek Hill, Kelsey, and Mahomes.
Oh yeah,
right. Like
if you can.
I have some dynasty leagues where a couple people had that combo and it's that trio and it's lethal. But now you're not going, all right, 2 first rounders and then I got to draft my quarterback in the 3rd. You're looking at Patrick Mahomes, who's fallen back a little bit. And then you have Travis Kelsey, who's a surefire, top pick for obvious reasons. Volume is going to be through the roof again. But how do you quantify what we're dealing with Juju, with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who caught a pretty $30 million contract, and then you've got rookies coming in more? Like how do we decipher where we should be looking at these guys?
I think this is the most fun we're ever going to have in terms of fantasy draft season, and the Chiefs offense. Because guys, I tweeted this out the other day. Follow me at Draftaholic. The Chiefs offense last year, obviously with the services of Tyreek Hill available to them, number 1 in the NFL in yards per drive, number 1 in the NFL in points per drive, number 26 in the NFL in touchdowns per drive. You want to tell me that Patrick Mahomes had an off year? No, he had some really weird variants while still absolutely crushing the league on a per play basis. If you look at the advanced metrics, Patrick Mahomes hasn't lost absolutely anything as a passer. He still is the best passer in the world. And you're telling me that there's positive regression possible for him as a passer next year? I don't really care who I take beyond Travis Kelsey. Do I think you're asking a lot of a 33-year-old tight end the way that they expect to lean on Travis Kelsey this year? Yeah, I do. I think it's an opportunity that Kelsey can absolutely crush, but also the injury risk is there simply because of his age, not because of anything having to do with the player himself. But this gets really fun when you talk about literally anybody else. Give me Juju. Give me MVS. Give me Sky Moore. I love this undrafted player, Justin Ross, who is probably going to be drafted at the end of your fantasy drafts. You're going to hear his name because he's going to make some preseason plays. He had first-round talent, but his medicals were all sorts of bad. He was only cleared to play medically by a certain number of NFL teams. One of them happened to be the Chiefs. We've already seen one little viral video about him. I think the Chiefs offense, including the running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is still going to be so fruitful from a fantasy perspective. Take your pick. Kelsey down the list. Anytime you get a chance to have them at or below ADP, just click yes.
Just from a redraft standpoint, there's a million different things you can do, but same with best ball. These are some of my favorite teams to target in best ball because you can go out, you can get Kelsey, you can get Mahomes. And then, depending on how many teams you're drafting, you can mix and match whatever you're trying to do elsewhere at the wide receiver position. And I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is more than interesting this year. Like I said, that was a miss last year too on my part. Again, I do think some is chalked up to injury, but at the same time, he just wasn't, like, the efficiency struggled. The most concerning thing, and might really be the best thing for this year, is pass catching upside. Look at who was there last year and who isn't there this year in the backfield, and tell me that he can't see a significant uptick in pass catching opportunity, right? I mean, I don't necessarily know if you're talking, I don't really know if we're like, Jerick McKinnon was just re-signed, a couple days ago?
A couple days ago. They need depth.
A couple days ago for depth.
Makes sense.
But Edwards-Helaire, can he benefit as a pass catcher this year more than he did in the past, even though Jerick McKinnon's there? Because before McKinnon got re-signed, it was like, oh my God, Edwards-Helaire could be huge. But just the fact that Tyreek Hill is no longer there, do you see a trickle down and a little bit of that volume, a little bit of that target volume go to someone like Edwards-Helaire? Because if so, you could see him far outpace where he's being drafted right now.
I actually think that's the easiest way to play this, is that you give Travis Kelce his share of the pie, right? Or maybe even extend it a little bit, saying that he deserves even a little bit more than he's had in the past, but it's not that much further he can go realistically. And then just say everyone else is, they're going to spray the ball around in a way that we were kind of talking about with the Arizona offense a few moments ago. Patrick Mahomes, I don't think really cares who he's throwing to, at least as long as they're open. And they certainly have plenty of athletes on that team. They definitely need a wide receiver to emerge. My pick, honestly, if you had to ask me, it's probably Sky Moore. They picked him to be a number one wideout, not Juju Smith-Schuster, who I think they're going to utilize effectively underneath. But I think if you had to ask me the actual number one wideout by the end of the season, it's Sky Moore if I had to choose one.
It could be. My biggest concern is that you're just looking at a large, just a wide distribution of targets throughout the season to guys not named Kelce. It could definitely be more. I think MVS is a little bit trickier. I don't know if Juju, what's left in the tank. Let's not forget, he had 2 really solid years, particularly was it 2018. And then everything started to fall apart, including, his body, but also the fact that Ben Roethlisberger was a shell of his old self. And then they were running with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph for a season. There was some ugly stuff there. Maybe he has it, but God, last year's so hard for me to take anything away from Juju before he got hurt, of course.
Yeah. I got a stat for you.
Go ahead.
How much Juju Smith-Schuster is making $3.25 million in guaranteed money this year. How much is Marquez Valdes-Scantling making in guaranteed money? Juju is 26. MVS is 28, by the way.
Well, I do know that Juju has like $10 million of incentive. He has this insane amount of incentives, right? But so MVS here 30. What's he making? Like 8?
10. $10 million. He got the same amount as Russell Gage. He got the same amount as Devontae Parker was due. Allen Robinson is the next tier up at 15.5. But
crazy. It's crazy.
They valued him almost 3 times as much in terms of guaranteed money.
I think you kind of have to, because he's not and we're going to talk about Hill for the Dolphins. This is a strange dynamic, but an interesting one with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But I think when it comes to MVS, he doesn't have the same contested catch ability as Tyreek. Hill's special in the sense that he's not just a deep threat. He's an everything threat. You can line him up anywhere. He's insanely explosive anywhere, out of the backfield, or you're just throwing screens and letting him do work, or you're letting him run 50 yards downfield and come up with an insane, ability to jump above 2 defenders and bring it down. He could do anything despite not being big. What is he, like 5'10", 180, I think? He's not big. But MVS, I think, to this offense just fits better. You already have Travis Kelce as somebody that you can use as a possession guy really anywhere. But without MVS, like Juju Smith-Schuster can't do that. You need some form of deep threat. And maybe you could say Mecole Hardman could to fit that bill to some extent, but he hasn't really blossomed yet. I think they had to. I think they were forced to value MVS at that.
I think as we're talking through it, it all clicks for me. Tyreek Hill is a do everything player. He is someone who you can send him deep and he can legitimately threaten over the top any single time. He's quick. You can be used as a slot, and you get him, on a slant route, and he can be legitimately gone. And like you said, you can use him out of the backfield creatively with those shovel passes they love to do. So they believe in the backfield that they can recreate that with Mecole Hardman. Out of the slot, they draft Sky Moore, 5'10", 191 with a 4'4", 140. Very similar to Tyreek Hill's 5'10", 185. That's probably your agility inside. And then MVS is responsible for going deep on the outside. But it speaks to what you said earlier. They're probably going to spray the ball much, much more if your name isn't Travis Kelce. That just need people to execute all 3 phases of what Tyreek Hill was able to do within their offense.
Yo, Dave Loughran and Matt Savoca here from Loughy and Savoca, a fantasy football podcast. Matt, where do they find us, man?
You can obviously watch right here if you're seeing this channel. We're also going to be living on the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel, so make sure to click subscribe over there as well. You can also find us in audio format on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts today.
Do you agree with Tyreek Hill's ADP right now?
No, sorry. I get why people in best ball drafts looking for the pure upside play are going for it. But if you're talking about your one home league, the one that you want that trophy behind you all season long with the bragging rights and everything that comes with it, nah, miss me with his ADP. I haven't seen enough from Tua Tagovailoa. It's that simple.
You know, one of the craziest things, and this is something I was looking at months ago, so I'm trying to pull it up again now just so I can get the numbers accurate here. We know that Tua Tagovailoa, and really even the coaching, the play calling was designed not to throw the ball downfield, which was kind of crazy. But when you look last year at Tua, he had one of the lowest deep ball percentages. So 20 plus yards, throwing the ball 20 plus yards downfield. He threw it 20 plus yards downfield at one of the lowest clips in the league last year. But what's crazy is that he had one of the highest adjusted completion percentages on those throws. So my question is it there? And I know where you're going. You're saying, I just haven't seen it yet. And there's so many other good players that I don't really want to spend a second round pick or an early second round pick on Tyreek Hill. Get that entirely. But at the same time, I don't think it's impossible that the Tua actually isn't terrible when it comes to deep balls if they open it up. But now we need to get everything right. And it's scary to need to get three things right with all the stars aligning when you're drafting a guy that early.
That's really right. You know, we talked about the way that elite offenses and grabbing wide receivers from elite offenses gives you multiple outs. Now you need to jump through multiple hoops in order to be correct. Not to say that Tyreek Hill isn't one of the most efficient wide receivers with the ball in his hands or even on a per route basis in the league, but really is this is about everyone trying to recreate what happened between 2019 and 2020 in Buffalo, right? This is about when Stefon Diggs went and got paired with Josh Allen. They became best friends, and we saw a new superstar at both the quarterback and the wide receiver position emerge together. Now, I think you could say Tyreek Hill is a superstar, and if you want to bet on Tyreek and on Tua being that next duo to really go to the next level as a team and as an offense, that is not the craziest argument to me at all. I actually have another favorite in the NFL as who that's going to be this year, but if you want to make that case, that's fine. I personally think that if you're going to make a bet on who is this year's Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs next level, it's Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown.
A.J. Brown?
Yeah, you heard me.
All right, talk to me, man. I mean, obviously we're getting into some stuff where, of course, Jalen Hurts has been there. And did you see that stat that, like, over the last 2 years, the top two players that have the highest percentage of weeks as a top 12 quarterback is Jalen Hurts and Aaron Rodgers?
Well, it just shows you the rushing upside of the quarterback position. Obviously, that really, really helps. And that's why I'm so in on Lamar Jackson once again this year, assuming he's healthy, man. He's got as high a probability as anyone to be the quarterback one overall. I digress. Let's talk about this Philadelphia Eagles new core, this new wide receiver core. I'm so sorry. You don't spend a first rounder in 3 straight years, because remember, they just traded their first rounder for a wide receiver, and then a second rounder on a quarterback to not eventually turn into a possible explosive pass-happy offense. So, in my opinion, we're going to see this team change their philosophy while still utilizing the best aspects of Jalen Hurts' rushing upside. You're throwing the ball to Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith, and A.J. Brown. I'm so sorry that is what you've got to do. And if Jalen Hurts can't, please get somebody who can, because this is an exciting offense. Even your boy Miles Sanders should get plenty of red zone opportunities if things go well. And I do think we should mention that there has been a lot of philosophical changes throughout the league as well. Coaching standpoint, that obviously changes things for many teams, but personnel teams don't lie when they make personnel moves like this. And we saw the viral Twitter picture of Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown getting in work together. I think it was down in Florida. They're already becoming that best duo buddy. And Devonta Smith, too. I mean, can you really expect better from a wide receiver, too? I realize they got Jalen Waddle in Miami, but I'm planting a flag.
You're buying in to this
I
offense. I'm honestly surprised. I don't disagree. As a Philly area native, I'm always skeptical. I don't let it influence my decision making, but it's all going. I mean, listen, we could say whatever we want, and I could try and give you every stat in the book, be as analytically driven as possible. But it all comes down to, can Jalen Hurts make throws? And if he does. And it kind of speaks to what you're saying, though. Like, do you give up everything? Not everything. I actually thought it was a great trade for A.J. Brown. But do you give up a first to get A.J. Brown? Do you draft Devonta Smith? Do you do all of this stuff and still have Jalen Hurts as your quarterback if you don't think he can, to some extent, get them the football?
Yeah. Neither Tua Tagovailoa nor Jalen Hurts have earth-shattering numbers. But here are things that I like about Jalen Hurts. He's not afraid to go deep. His 9.0 air yards per attempt, third highest in the NFL. So at least he knows what talent he has when he's throwing deep. He actually was 7th in Player Profiler's money throws rating, which means throws over 20 yards or throws that required exceptional athleticism. And he was still top 20 in the NFL in total air yards. So he's not throwing deep. If he throws more often, they were 21st in the NFL in pass attempts. If they move that up to, say, 12th, a little bit better than league average, and he's throwing that deep every time, now you're talking about a team that could be one of the top teams in total air yards. And from an efficiency standpoint, 16th in expected points added, league average right now, and getting better in terms of his own efficiency and his surrounding cast. I just see a lot of upside here. And especially A.J. Brown, man, there's something special about him. I know Tyreek Hill, an amazing player in his own right, but A.J. Brown just makes some catches that, honestly, the only person I can remember in my time really following fantasy football making catches like that is Antonio Brown in his absolute prime.
Look, I don't disagree with anything. All I'm saying is I have a very difficult time trying to evaluate this offense this year. And one of the reasons for that is no team had a lower pass play percentage in the league last year than the Philadelphia Eagles. And the crazy thing about that is it wasn't the case early in the season. They ran the football so much over the second half of the year that they finished 32nd or you could say first in run play percentage. It's really remarkable stuff how much they changed things around. And they actually started doing that before Miles Sanders came back into the fold. Remember, he was injured. I think the hope here is that there's a lot of efficiency, and that's what comes back to my Jalen Hurts comments. Is I don't think the volume is going to be there, even if they aren't the highest or the lowest passing team in the league again. Tennessee was without Derrick Henry all season long. Not all season, but a lot of the season. There's a lot to go into that. It's still a tough team for me to figure out. And another reason is you look anywhere right now when you're projecting overall talent of an offensive line or performance, Philadelphia Eagles are going to either be first or they're going to be top 3. The offensive line is fantastic.
They're great.
And as far as run blocking goes, they're also really good. So I'm still a little bit up in the air here, and not to play like a cop-out role, but I don't know what to expect. And I think it all is hinging on whether or not Jalen Hurts is if he's remotely efficient, this offense is going to absolutely hum.
Just get to the point where you have enough throws on a per game basis from your quarterback so that you can legitimately evaluate him. I think that's about 35 passes a game. And you said it really shifted over the course of the 2021 season. Just listen to the number of pass attempts Jalen Hurts had. 35 in week 1, 23 week 2, 39, 48, 37. So he has huge passing volume against Dallas, Kansas City, Carolina. and then something happens.
And two of those games they got shit on by Kansas City and by Dallas.
Obviously, game situation. The more you're losing, the more likely you are to pass on any given play. Absolutely. But in my opinion, a modern offense should never be throwing the ball 14 times in a game, 17 times in a game, 23, 24 times in a game. Get that out of here.
But
you're absolutely
won all
right.
Those games. That's why I'm saying it makes it tough. They might have lost one of those games, but they won almost all of those games where they had absurdly low passing volume. They won. So am I agreeing with that approach? Not necessarily, but if it shows in the results, do we see a similar approach this year? That's what I'm saying.
I still don't think you go get AJ Brown to say we're ready to be a run first team that throws 14 times a game.
Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. They got some good pass catchers on that team. I do think it'll be more balanced though, but they're not going to be a pass heavy team. We can agree on that.
Yeah. And now I think it is worth it to talk about some of these quarterback changes as well as we get everyone ready for their first fantasy drafts or as they lock back into the fantasy seasons. We did have some big names changing teams. Matt Ryan moves on from the Atlanta Falcons, gets traded to the Colts. The Colts were able to way too easily move on from Carson Wentz. He's traded to Washington for, in my opinion, way too much draft capital. We still got a mess of a situation right now with the Deshaun Watson news. Don't really want to get into that. But these quarterback changes are definitely going to change place. And we didn't really talk about Davante Adams changing the landscape in Las Vegas, but really all I can say is that was a team that threw for a lot of yards, had a lot of trouble with touchdowns, and you get a player like Davante Adams to deal with issues in the red zone. So that was a good fit. Not that Davante Adams on any team would be a bad fit.
No, but I mean, you look at what the concentration of targets in Las Vegas is going to be this year. It's going to be crazy. Is there another player not named Davante Adams, Hunter Renfrow, or Darren Waller? Is there another guy that sees a target all season? I mean, obviously I'm being hyperbolic, but I really don't see how. I truly don't see how those guys aren't making up like 80% of the target share this year in Las Vegas.
It's another team with like a no excuses situation, and I realize the division they play in is the biggest excuse, right? Because this AFC West is as stacked a division as I have ever seen. But the talent surrounding him for Derek Carr is just fantastic. Hunter Renfrow, when the rest of the receiving core went down around him, all he did was produce at a Pro Bowl level, made the Pro Bowl this year. They added Demarcus Robinson from KC, and obviously the big signing, Davante Adams. No, you are not giving Matt Collins, Keelan Cole, Tyron Johnson, and Javon Wims significant target shares. Those people are the proverbial wind sprint runners, while Renfrow, Adams, and Darren Waller take up a majority of the targets. And we should mention, I don't necessarily worry about stacking when I'm playing in my regular fantasy football league. If it happens at value, fine. But I am trying to division stack this year. I want to root for these. I want to have people on both sides of these AFC West divisional showdowns, whether it's Denver or Las Vegas, the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the same thing with the AFC North. Even taking some chances here and there on the Steelers, but absolutely on the Bengals, the Ravens, and if the Browns have a quarterback, the Browns as well. So I think both of those divisions really line up as places you just want to root on Sunday. And if you have game stacks, if you know from our DFS videos, it's always good to have players on both sides, because when a shootout happens, you'll benefit. Both offenses will benefit.
We also talk a lot about best ball on here, and that's going to happen. But of course, we'll get a lot more into redraft as the offseason wears on. But right now, it really is an ideal time to get into best ball because of huge contests over at Underdog Fantasy right now. You've got the Best Ball Mania III has 10 million in total prizes, Matt.
10 million total prizes, 2 million to first, 1 million to second, and I love the regular season champion prize of $1 million.
It's crazy. And they're doing super flex contests now.
Yep.
It's good stuff.
Did you hear the news from the data and tools team as well over at Stokastic.com? The best ball package is going to feature anything in terms of the changing tournament landscape on Underdog. We are going to be offering rankings and projections for that. Just got word.
Beautiful. And while we are Stokastic now, the promo code Awesemo gets you $100. The Underdog will double your first deposit bonus up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. We'll get that changed over. Some logistics stuff behind the scenes. But you're talking about if you have you deposit 100, they give you another 100 back. You're looking at a nice little bankroll to kick it off, whether it's the puppy, you're entering $5 contest with huge prize pools, or the Best Ball Mania contest. It is right now the best way to play fantasy football. You might disagree, but maybe you just haven't tried it yet. Best Ball is absurdly fun, especially this early in the year. If you're going to do it, use the promo code Awesemo. All right, so I want to get to just a couple more teams here. We won't keep you all day, but a couple more spots here that are interesting, not as much from a personnel on the field perspective, but more from a coaching standpoint. And I think Minnesota comes in at the top of that list. Now that you've got a coach coming in from under Sean McVay and the Super Bowl winning champions, how much of a difference, I think this would be the question. How much do we really know about Kevin O'Connell in terms of how he calls plays? And how much do you think, if much, this offense, the identity of this offense is going to change? And what's the impact?
I have a lot of high expectations, and I'm trying to balance and measure that expectations because we had high hopes for coaches like Matt Nagy, who came from the Andy Reid playbook, and we thought that maybe he was going to transform the Chicago Bears offense. Spoiler alert, he did not. But there have even been little sound bites from players like Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson talking about the level of change that is occurring in offensive philosophy, the amount that they've had to learn over the course of the offseason, probably in terms of terminology, play calls, formations, just all the factors that go into changing an offense from a run-heavy Kubiak-style scheme to a pass-heavy, modern Sean McVay-style scheme. I still think with superstars like Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen executing that new offense, we could be in for some really, really big offensive fireworks in Minnesota. I'm taking as many chances as I can get, and I even like Kirk Cousins at his current ADP.
Is Adam Thielen still a superstar?
Hey, getting open is hard in the NFL, and getting open in the end zone, let alone getting open in the end zone all the time, sounds like probably the hardest part of playing the wide receiver position, and that man's really good at that.
He gets a lot of touchdowns. Yes, he does. He scores a lot of touchdowns. The only reason I asked you that was the target share. I guess he's still a very good wide receiver 2 option. He's somebody that I still have yet to completely make my mind up yet as we head into redraft, or make my mind up on yet as we head into redraft season in the coming months, because he's the type of guy that there are going to be games where you see double-digit targets, and he at the same time, though, as the season wore on, you began to see that target share and just overall raw targets come down a little bit. Do we see that influence touchdowns, or does he continue to be still that dominant presence inside the red zone? And let me ask you one more thing to add to this. I think you could probably give a pretty interesting answer on this, but not something I hear talked about all that much. They really were there was a dearth of red zone options on that team last year, outside of Thielen. And sure, Justin Jefferson can do his thing. Mm-hmm. But what about the fact that Irv Smith went down before the season started? I mean, this guy is absurdly athletic, can be a force in the red zone. Do you think he takes away from some of that shine from Adam Thielen, assuming he's fully healthy?
Yeah, let me answer both questions independently here. It's inexcusable to use Adam Thielen like you did in his final 2 weeks that he played in the regular season, week 13, week 16. Obviously, they were not in contention, and part of it, or injuries, obviously, but 2 targets in week 13, 3 targets in week 16, egregious. I think that Adam Thielen with 7 targets a game, not 8, 9, anything like that, even just 7 targets a game can do damage for you, even just with the touchdown probability. Irv Smith sounds like a great athletic tight end option to add to a Sean McVay style offense. Did Tyler Higbee stop Cooper Kupp or Odell Beckham from producing in Los Angeles? Absolutely not. He was a nice to have player in fantasy. Same thing with Irv Smith. I feel like he's a nice to have player, but Adam Thielen, particularly with the significantly lower ADP than his teammate Justin Jefferson, I still feel like represents a significant amount of upside because of that new coaching staff. It is concerning. He's 32 years old. His yards per target has dropped 3 straight seasons. I still think I'm willing to take a chance on Thielen in his age 32 season. I realize there's a little bit of what they say in the gambling world, a little risk of ruin, because when it falls off for these elite receivers, it tends to fall off pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does. But that's why a lot of times, if you're a guy like Adam Thielen, that's why I'm so focused on the touchdowns, because as you get older, a lot of these guys still sustain some of that touchdown upside. If they've been guys that score a lot of touchdowns throughout their career, whereas other guys who just, rely on in between the 20s production and once in a while score, I think take the biggest hits. But all right, I'm with you.
And the biggest thing, it wasn't like huge amount of red zone volume, right? His 15 red zone targets were 23rd in the NFL. That's pretty good for a starting, a secondary wide receiver, but he still ends up with the 7th most touchdowns at the position. Yeah. That to me seems like it's his efficiency.
Yeah. I mean, we saw Mike Evans too. Just some of these guys, absurd red zone efficiency. I don't know how sustainable it is to convert the targets into touchdowns at that clip, but yeah, you're right. He is good at getting open in the end zone. What about the Giants overhaul when it comes to coaching? Is there anything we can take away from this team from a fantasy? And obviously I'm not, of course there is, but is there anything we love from the Giants this year from a fantasy standpoint, going into the 2022 season after they've just been horrendous year after year over year, man?
I think the congruence, the things that we love to see are the congruency and the same page nature that the current coach, Brian Dabble, and the new GM, also the assistant GM coming over from Buffalo, the simpatico that they currently have. You do not see that in every organization, and getting off on the right foot as a new front office and a new coaching structure, that's a really good sign, because they have a new defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and new coach, Brian Dabble, coming over again from Buffalo. From a fantasy standpoint, I think the takeaway is that Kenny Golladay is basically the same player as we thought he was going to be last year with a lower ADP, and Kadarius Toney, at least in a small sample size, looked like he was going to be an effective player in this league. Do we know for sure? No, but I have some pretty good film to show me, Kadarius Toney breaking ankles of defenders while his ankle needed to be looked at. Like, it wasn't 100% at all. And the other thing I'll say is, if this offense does improve, even to just league average in efficiency, then Saquon Barkley is going to be a smash at his ADP, because he's going to have plenty of touches in what might be his final year in New York.
That's one of the biggest question marks is Saquon Barkley right now. Biggest question marks, because with a lot of these other players, you are not necessarily risking a ton of draft capital on them. You can take some stabs. Even what's Tony's ADP right now? He's
9th round, 10th round sometimes.
I'm perfectly fine with that. No issues, whatever. I think, again, though, and this is one of my biggest concerns every single year with this New York Giants team. Are they going to have a remotely respectable offensive line this year? I think it's better. I definitely think it's improved, because it can't really get worse. But we saw Saquon Barkley, healthy or not, the efficiency running behind that line was egregiously bad. And you look at his rookie season, when you're passing the ball to him 10 times a game, it's going to look really, really good. Not to mention their offense actually wasn't as bad. Now you're looking at a team that this offensive line, everything is dependent on that. Forget about the quarterback position for a second. If you can't get anything going behind that line, you once again fall behind first and second down, and then you're looking at 3rd and 8 every single drive, as we saw. It was really hard to watch, even when Barkley was on the field last year. But if you have retooled this line even a little bit to make them league average, hell, they could be a little bit less than league average. Saquon Barkley, let's assume that he comes back from injuries and is back to, close to his original self. You're right. It could be an absolute smash spot. If this line sucks, you're in trouble again. I really do. I think he'd be in trouble again.
I think that offensive line and its leverage point with this Giants team, it could be too bad for it to function properly, and then this all starts to crumble down. Daniel Jones doesn't have enough time. He has a turnover-heavy season. None of these players hit ADP, and even Saquon Barkley, regardless of the amount of 3rd and 10 dump-offs he gets, doesn't live up to ADP. But I think there is also a scenario where this team fits wait for this non-analytical take from me, where he fits the general mold of what 400 fantasy point players look like. Teams that are out of the running from a playoff or Super Bowl standpoint that can kind of pass well. We saw it with Christian McCaffrey. Remember, he had a young DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel playing on his team when Christian McCaffrey had that superstar season a few seasons ago. The same thing with Le'Veon Bell as a Pittsburgh Steeler, with David Johnson when he was with the Cardinals. Those teams were supposed to be contenders that fell off, could pass a little bit, and at the end of the season, when they were out of it, just kept giving it to their superstar, especially one that they may not be giving a brand new contract to. I think you could see a massive, like the biggest workload he's had in his entire career on an offense that's just slightly improved and an ADP that's lower than ever. Man, if you can get it, him at the end of the second round, I love this all first rounders strategy that you can start to do if you have an early first round pick, like say Christian McCaffrey in the first, Saquon Barkley in the second, and then Leonard Fournette in the 3rd round. You get all these first round running backs in there. It's not to say that's my only strategy, but I'm in on Saquon Barkley this year.
Okay. I think I'm a little bit more skeptical, but this should be fun to talk through as the season comes out. His last 28 games, he has 8 rushing touchdowns. Like, I don't know.
A function of his decrepit offense.
I know. I just don't know how much better it's going to be.
This is going to be fun, man.
I know. If you're right, and this offense is even, I shouldn't say marginally better, but if this offense is good enough to get like even close to middle of the road, Saquon Barkley is going to have a huge year. If not, you're going to be looking at, 13 games last year, had 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. I think that's like the lowest end outcome for him. But yeah, you need touchdowns when you're talking about running backs. So it's going to, yeah. What does this offense look like? Forget about Saquon Barkley. He's going to be a product of this offense. Unless they use him like they did in 2018, and that's not happening again. Unless you think it does. It was just 121 targets.
Eli's coming back, right? No, I mean, that is a perfect example, right? That offense was a little bit better than you remember. They had Odell Beckham. Eli Manning, at least, maybe from an arm strength standpoint, he couldn't do it anymore, but at least from a quarterback competency standpoint, he was at least league average on pretty much a game-by-game basis, and that was enough for a healthy Saquon Barkley to dominate in fantasy.
Yeah, man. All right. Yeah. Last year, they averaged 1.4 offensive touchdowns per game.
Please change. Please. New coaching regime, please. Something different.
It's possible. 2.4 per game. And obviously, that's just one stat. We can look at a whole lot else. But all right, before we get out of here, I think we've covered a lot today. And we were going to cover some more, but I think when we top 10 offenses we were going to hit on fantasy from a fantasy perspective, I think next episode we can dive into that, because you and I aren't you and I aren't exactly well, we are verbose in every sense of the term. So we don't speak with brevity, Matt. So I think next episode will be solid to tackle that. But I want to ask you something. If you were to give me your top Super Bowl contenders, one that you think is, if you had to pick one team to win that you thought, forget about odds or anything, just one team that you have winning, and then one team that might not have the shortest odds. It doesn't have to be like, 300 to 1 or 3, it doesn't have to be something insane, but a team that you think could sneak in there and be a legitimate competitor for the Super Bowl this season.
Absolutely. If I have to give you one team, I'm sorry. I'm just too old. I'm too old now to go against Tom Brady. If he's decided to play, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and this NFC that really doesn't have a whole lot of firepower besides maybe the Rams and the Packers, who are also retooling a bit without Devontae Adams. If I had to give you one team, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
All right.
And then the team that has a shot that maybe you're not thinking about, this is actually easy for me as well. And I've actually been talking about them all off season long. I talked about them before the draft. I talked about them after the draft. I thought they had a fantastic draft and free agency. The Baltimore Ravens have a great path to, first of all, a playoff berth. Assuming health, I think they smash, especially with what's going on with this rebuilding year in Pittsburgh and what's going on in Cleveland. But also the fact that they're playing that last place schedule because of the quality of the AFC North last year is going to be huge for them as they get so much talent back, not only at the quarterback position with Lamar Jackson healthy once again, but the running back core was decimated last year. Their cornerback core was decimated. And those are two positions of absolute strength. You could say they might have the two best running back core and cornerback core in the league when healthy. And they were still competent last year. I think the Ravens could absolutely be lifting the Super Bowl trophy when all is said and done.
22 to 1. Not bad. I'm going chalky for my top team. It's the Bills. I think this is, look, it's just they haven't broken through yet, but you look at the previous seasons, if you were to look back and been like, oh, the Bills won the Super Bowl, it wouldn't have been a surprise to anybody, right? No. Overtime against Kansas City. Absolute heroics from Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. That team or that game could not have been more gut-wrenching or heartbreaking if you're Josh Allen or you're Stephon Diggs or Gabriel Davis. I mean, they played well. They
played so well.
Kansas City got the ball first in overtime, right? Like, what else can you say? That's all it was. And then Kansas City went on to lose to the Bengals. You telling me you don't think Josh Allen would have had a legitimate chance against the Bengals, that the Bills wouldn't have been clear favorites in that game? You're crazy. I love the Bills. I think this could be the breakthrough season. They have all the pieces. Defensively, the biggest issue was the run defense last year. I mean, remember the wind game? Remember that wind game?
Yeah. Yep.
When Damian Harris got hurt, but not before
they still ran all over them and found a weakness. Yeah.
Running roughshod on them. And then it was Stevenson came in and then did the same thing. So I love them this year. If I'm going, this isn't really off the board, but it's outside of the top 5. I think I'd go with the Chargers. Now, the thing with the Bills is just they have the division to where, all right, Miami, do they improve? Sure. But the Miami Dolphins aren't the Kansas City Chiefs.
Wow.
The Patriots going to be fine. I'm sure they'll be fine. But you look at and you mentioned this, the AFC West, really crowded division. But I like Justin Herbert. I love this offense. I like the defense. I think the Chargers are one of those teams that could make some real, they could be a big surprise this year. And every year they lose. Every game that they lose is decided by like 2 points. No team loses more by one possession or really just one possession than the LA Chargers. And they've always found ways to do that. But I'm on the LA Chargers this year. Every year I root for them. I like this team. I love the offense. It's a tough division. tough division, but they're a really good football team. So
for a minute, I thought you were saying the Dolphins were your pick, and I was about to jump out of my seat.
I was saying the Bills have an easier time navigating that division with the Jets, Dolphins, and Patriots.
Oh, yes. 100% agree. But gosh, I love this Chargers team. Please stay healthy. And Justin Herbert, superstar. He's already a superstar, but if you don't know how good he is, you will this year. Well,
this is fun, man. Episode 1 in the books. Be coming back at you next week. Episode 2, we'll get into the top 10 offenses. A lot more fun stuff. You can follow Matt at Draftaholic, me at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a review for us and hit us up. Leave a comment on Twitter. What do you think? What do you want to hear us talk about next? Appreciate you guys. We'll see you back here next week for episode 2 of Loughy and Savoca, a fantasy football podcast.
Peace.